But let's have everyone introduce themselves before we start the panel.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
let's see. Deena, why don't you kick us off?
I was hoping you would not pick me first, but
no!
I'm kidding. So, hi everyone. My name is Deena McKay. I am a podcaster. So, I have a podcast called Black Tech Unplugged, where I highlight the stories of Blacks who work in tech and are innovating the space. But also, from a tech perspective, I work as a Scrum Master. So, basically, what I do is I help make sure that my teams are actually doing Agile, not the fake Agile, and also make sure that my teams are just making sure that they are forming as a team and are friendly and always improving. So that's just a little bit about me.
Nice. Who wants to go next? Who shall I choose? Myriam.
Hello, my name is Myriam, and I'm a bit of an unusual bird. I specialize in search engine optimization. So it's halfway in the technical, halfway in figuring out what people are typing in Google when they think no one's watching. And it's very, very interesting. As you can probably tell based on my accent, I am so very French, but also half Hungarian. And I grew up in Hawaii. This explains the non-Pepe Le Pew accent. So I've been hanging around devs for a very, very, very long time. And I've noticed some things in code. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Let's move right across. Selam.
Hello, everyone. I'm Selam. I'm a software engineer. I currently work at a med tech company. And I'm just someone that's really excited about DEI in tech and how we can improve the space.
Excellent. And you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gift. I currently work as a developer advocate at Cloudflare. But before that, I was working as a front-end engineer. And on the side, I really love to, share resources, content for people like myself that are looking to pivot into the tech space. So I also make content on the side through platforms like my YouTube channel and Instagram accounts, for example. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us. We have got a pretty packed schedule today. I'm excited about it. For those of you who are tuning in, we're going to start off with a discussion panel with everyone here, and then we're going to break out into one-on-one sessions. You can find the whole agenda outlined, I believe, on our Twitter account, on the Kendo UI Twitter account. So, but that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our discussion panel. So our plan for today, we're going to be debunking myths about diversity and inclusion in tech. So in this group panel, we're going to look specifically at some common myths, some misconceptions, things that we've heard that are definitely untrue, and we're going to break down why they're incorrect. So if you in the chat have any assumptions, quote unquote rules, common statements, things you've heard about D&I and tech, you want us to break them down, validate them, disprove them, drop them in. We'll get to those as well. Alyssa, do you want to kick us off with our first myth?
Absolutely. I'm like, as I open up paper.
Oh, sorry.
I totally had to restart right before with my internet issues. I had it all. You ever have it where you have everything lined out perfectly and then your computer's like, nah, brah, I'm not even in it for you today. So sorry, let me pull that up. And
no, you should see my desk. Anytime we do a long stream, I'm like, okay, I got some snacks. I got water. I got a coffee.
Oh my God. I know Myriam was like, I got to go grab my tea. And I was like, oh, yeah, tea. I have 4 shots of espresso, but tea. No, this is the ADHD. Myriam was also talking about backstage the ADHD. I try to manage it for the loving fans. So, all right, myth number 1. Are we ready for it? I got it up.
Yeah, let's rip it.
Okay. It is race, gender, or other aspects of a developer's identity don't matter in a workplace. All that matters is how well a person can code. The diversity of a team, any given team, has no impact on the products that they create.
So this is myth number 1.
Who wants to take a crack at it first? True, untrue, what stood out? Immediately wrong.
I'll go first. So I feel like there's a couple of different myths within that one. Yeah. So like I'll start with the race, gender, and other aspects of a developer's identity that don't matter in the workplace. So definitely think that's false. I think that's a myth. And I say that because if it was always based on merit, then things would be a lot different in the workplace. And so even though we want to say, a lot of times people will say like, we don't see color, we don't, see these things. Obviously you have to see them. Like I can see that we're all women, in this chat. It's just an obvious thing. So things do depend on that and matter in the workplace. It's because we all have an unconscious bias, and everyone will say, no, I don't have any bias. Like we all have an unconscious bias. Like even I have one, everyone has it. And so we can't help but make decisions based on some of those unconscious bias, especially if we don't realize that we have them. And so I do think that race, gender, and other aspects affect someone's performance or even if how they progress in the workplace. But then I also want to touch on the part of the diversity of a given team has no impact of the products they create. Completely false. The reason I say that, perfect example, everyday example is, as a Black woman, if I am in a bathroom and I have to wash my hands, because of the people who created the product, if I put my hand under, sometimes it might work, but most times it doesn't. So it's like you're sitting there waving your hand under this thing. And so someone obviously didn't think of me because maybe someone who looks like me wasn't able to have insight into the product. And so, yeah, diversity definitely impacts how products are created. We see it in a lot of examples every day, but very curious to hear the other ladies' thoughts on this too.
I definitely agree with you, Deena, and I love that you mentioned our example because I think recently I saw a picture of that on Twitter around some time ago. But also speaking from personal experience, I find that as developers, when we're building products, it's good to also account for other people as well that are not specifically like us. So for example, if you're in the US and you're building your applications for people around the world, you should also account for people in Africa, for example. One big thing that I find that is very different is in the US, of course, internet is crazy fast, right? In Africa, you can't really say the same. And it's also very expensive to access internet. So if you're building applications, performance-wise, it's important to account for that for your users so that people accessing your applications from that area can also have similar experience as people from other regions as well. So just not thinking about just yourself, where you're from geographically when building products, you should also account for other regions and other people as well. I think it's very important.
So go first because I am going to be the angry old lady in this one.
Do it, please.
Sure, no problem. I mean, echoing what the others have said, this is a huge issue. And the hand dryer example is one of the many recalls and hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars that have been wasted on a bad product built by exceptional engineers who can code, who can build things, who are super intelligent, but had this huge misstep because they weren't accounting for the diverse communities that they are creating this product for, which aren't reflective of the actual people who are building these products. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is situations where one is creating a bad user experience because of the lack of diversity.
Do I jump in?
Oh, yes.
All right.
Okay, so let's talk about this thing. The first thing for me is I've ended up in teams where I was the only resource being able to do what I did. I am a technical SEO. So I'm not here to write beautiful titles that will grab your attention, okay? I'm here to talk about performance. And I stepped into a room with my new team for this new project. Doesn't mean I didn't know them. I was in a dev center. I knew all of these folks. And I got told, "Oh, you're here. I can't work with you." I'm like, "What did I do?" I thought, being in Canada, it was the anti-French thing, because that's also a big problem. No. I was told, "Yeah, women, no, it's not happening. I'm sorry. Can't work with you." And the problem is that I do not necessarily have the proper filter. I know I've been socialized wrong as what I'm supposed to be. And I looked at this person and I went, when I code, it's not with my vagina on the keyboard. Like, what is your problem? And then he was just so disgusted that he couldn't process what was happening. And I ended up being the bad person in this story, and I didn't understand why to this day. But yes, when we talk about, like this myth, it happened to me all the time, and I couldn't understand. And I would end up in situations to this day, like, I still can't understand it. I know I have a different brain wiring, obviously, because clearly things keep happening to me in social settings that are not normal. But I've ended up with developers who were 6'4", blocking my path, going, "You are not putting in this requirement. I'm not working on this. Even though it's needed, I'm not. Like, it's not fitting in." "Oh, Deena, I see you being shocked, but imagine how shocked he was when I literally lifted him out of the way and moved on." And you're not supposed to touch people. I know this, but he was genuinely standing in my path on purpose, and I didn't see another way out of it. So, like, I'm not saying I'm proper here. I'm not saying this is what you should do.
I think the lifting is like there's a lot of other violent ways to get past that situation, right? That's like a gentle nudge.
I'm mostly impressed. I like to lift as a hobby. I don't think I can move a 6'4" man.
He complained. He was so shocked. He was like, "I have a fragile back. Don't do this to me." Really bad. So do not be me. But I'm just saying that it's an accumulation of things that keep happening to you, and you're like, "Why does this keep happening? Why am I fighting so hard?" And I ended up by putting my name, my initial, not Myriam, but just M, in signatures, because I noticed that people were questioning my knowledge a lot less, and I had a lot less pushback, and it was going easier. So I don't think any of this is normal. I'm not saying everybody does it on purpose, but I'm just saying it gets brought to the table, okay? And the more we complain about it, the more it gets dismissed, because, "Oh, no, I don't know. Please explain it to me. Why is it so difficult?" So these things cause issues, but we're so busy pretending they're not there that we can't address them. There's no system to turn to go, "Hey, like, can we start the process? Because I have a problem. Can we solve it?" You can't solve it because the problem doesn't exist, right? Because it's a myth. It's not. So when we talk about race, gender, and other aspects, I'm one of those strange birds, as I said previously. I am the secret Jew. I do not look like the Jewish stereotype, and yet my name is Myriam, my brother is Michael, my dad was Moses. Like, you can't get more Jewish than Moses in terms of stereotypes, but it is what it is, And when I have people looking at me and they're like, "Really?" And they do the little, like, tilt. So I don't think anybody around here knows what the tilt is. You check if my nose, my profile, is Jewish enough or not. Yeah, this happens to me a lot. And I get deemed
as a fellow Jew. I am dying.
You understand this? Did you ever get the tilt?
I get it, and I'm cracking up.
So this is a real thing. I like it is a thing, and I am tech support level 1 in the "Why do Jews?" I get so many DMs from people asking me questions. I'm like, "How does that impact my job?" "Oh, you think I get contracts because, okay, oh, I see where we're going here." And you realize that people are packing in, like, all these almost expectations. Like, you're supposed to, it's kind of like being a leprechaun. There's so many things that are expected of me, and I'm like, what are these things? And then people turn around and go, "No, but it's only how good you are." No. no, this has been validated already. If I'm at the table, it's that I'm here. Already getting to the table is difficult, but you also hear things in the hallways like, oh, I bet she got her job because her husband helped her on the challenge. Yeah. So
I see some
understand.
nods from other folks. Have y'all had similar experiences of she's only here because XYZ?
Yeah, personally, I think this is also related to the next thing we're going to talk about, right? Where I find that when people see me at certain places, specifically conferences, this happens a lot because when I go to speak at conferences, I find that most times I'm the only Black female speaker or the only female speaker.
Mhm.
And then they ask, do you really deserve to be there? Or do you really deserve to be invited? Or they're just trying to fill their diversity quota,
Mm.
I get that a lot. Like people literally ask me that. Is that why you're getting all these conferences?
It like
What can
No.
it goes,
what can you
I mean, it goes through me like, because I know people have these thoughts, but to actually be to your face, I'm assuming it's not just like a message. Like I'm assuming like with their mouth, they're saying these words.
It could even be from like they're also they don't know that they're coming off as offensive, right? They're just curious, but I also find it offensive, right?
You're so kind because
I
to
don't.
me,
Yeah,
the
I'm
way
like,
I
how?
Oh my god!
I'm like,
How?
I'm not technical support for you, for your insecurities and for your misunderstanding. It's not my job to educate you. I'm tired of this.
I feel like that's a downside for me, specifically the being kind part, even when people are being shitty. Yeah, it's something I'm still trying to navigate, but yeah, it happens to me a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this chat from Aaron says that's the worst feeling. I've had someone ask me if I would speak because they have no women on the panel. Like what? I've also had that happen where it's like I've had a conference organizer come back to me and I know they've already gone through the initial round and they're trying to even the numbers. And that is the worst feeling. I remember actually chatting with you about it, Alyssa, because it was pretty early in this job. And I was like, should I take this one?
Yeah, I would love to know like what our panel thinks about this, because we had a private conversation about this and I was like tasked with like, make sure Kathryn doesn't fall into any holes and get eaten by lions. She's new to this job. And I was like, got it.
You were like my onboarding mentor. And the first thing I did was like...
And she comes to me and she's like, so these people want me to talk, but they literally only want me to talk because I'm a woman. And I was like... So my advice, and I really want to know if this goes against like the code as like underrepresented groups in tech, because I said that really sucks. You still should do it because we need the representation out there. And the more that we persist this, I'm a knowledgeable, strong, independent woman who knows more than you, like out there in the world, like that's a positive win for us.
Myriam gearing up.
Okay, yeah, go and go. So what's your take on it? Because do you just boycott people like that or communities like that or groups like that? What's your...
No, I will make them feel guilty and they won't even know why because clearly they don't learn. But I used to say yes. And what I used to do is be petty and show up at these conferences because, your inbox will get filled around like the beginning of March, end of February going, ooh, oh, I see gift. Yeah, okay. So you get all these requests and now I'm petty. I go on LinkedIn and on Twitter and I'm like, shout out to all the women getting contacted for this at the last minute because they realized it would be bad to not have a single woman represent any, like the event is just all dudes. And I usually get told, we asked, but they were all on vacation. So we decided to start making a joke in my industry and go like, yeah, we're not all on vacation. We actually have a list of people you could contact. So now we have an Excel spreadsheet. And every time people complain, we have the Excel pops up. And for me, if you're going to invite me just for that sheer purpose, usually I say no automatically, or I check and I'm like, I'm the only one. Or I will be petty and have like a little 3 slides to start off the conference talk about, hey, here are all these people you could have asked actually. Why are they not here? They're in your town. Like I could pull this off and I'm not even from here. Why is this happening? And then the last but not least, if I still feel like I want to do it because of different reasons, am I allowed to swear here or no?
Yeah,
I don't.
you
I was gonna say I don't think there are rules. I don't know. If there are rules, I don't know them. So
someone gets upset, you can blame it on me. I said you can swear.
Well, I will say the obligatory, pardon my French, that way, I can pull it off, but fuck
I feel
you,
like that
pay
works
me.
better when you're actually French.
Absolutely. But it's true, like, demand payment in that case. You want to take my time to benefit your thing? Pay me. That's it. And if you can't pay me, that's fine. I will tell you my fee and you can donate it to different organizations that actually show you care.
I did think we got an interesting comment a little late in response to the first question where someone told the story, saying a friend of mine with a very Middle Eastern name took a CV template, wrote his info on it, sent it to 30 employers and got no responses. Got a new template, changed his name, very general John Smith, got 16. Same content, different name. Lines really what you mentioned, you just going by your initials. Say, I assume probably all of us have had similar experiences.
I make my friends change their names. I have a friend of mine who's stuck at Amazon for years with like a typo on her name because, switching from a C to an S made all the difference. And now she sounds exotic instead of Moroccan. And she got hired.
Man. Have any of the rest of you encountered difficulties around your name or people spelling your name or pronouncing your name or...
So I haven't had any experiences from a resume perspective. I think my name is, I'll put it this way. If you saw my name, you probably wouldn't think that I am probably a Black woman. Like there could be Deenas who don't look like me. So I haven't had that, but I have seen where people have changed their name on their resumes, gotten like thousands of calls versus they were getting 0 calls for months. And it's crazy. Again, that goes back to the unconscious bias. Like we want to say that, we're all inclusive and we do all these things. And really there's this hidden bias because like Myriam, like you said, we don't address it. It's like, it's a myth. It's not real. We don't have these issues. And since you don't address it, it's still affecting people. And it's crazy that this is still happening in 2023. Like this has been happening for decades. This is nothing new. And we're still not addressing the main issue of, hey, we need to address that. We have a couple little biases that we need to talk about. But I also want to go back to the comment that was being made about underrepresented people going to conferences. I think everyone's had that experience of like being called because you're the only woman. Can you please hop on stage? First off, I'm not taking any last minute requests. Like if you're going to do something that's like 2 days before, can you hop on this because we don't have any diversity? That's a definite no. Also, Myriam, to your point, pay me because we already know there's a pay gap. We already know what's going on there. So why would I come speak for free just so that you look good? What does that do for me? I don't care if it's making you look better. You're just doing it because the optics of it all. But what are you really doing behind the scenes? And even if you do take it and pave the way for someone new or another woman to do it later, it's like, is it really worth it? So I'm very intentional with requests like that. I have to make sure that there's some alignment within, the opportunity. So I think it really depends. But for me, usually not taking last minute requests, and then also just like careful of what organizations you align to.
I definitely agree with you, Deena. I was also going to mention that sometimes in those situations, it's kind of hard because I like to think about who am I actually doing this talk for? And sometimes I'm thinking about, okay, I'm doing it for the people in the back who are like me, who care, who are interested, and who just want to see that representation on the platform or on the stage. And so during those situations where I've been asked to speak and I feel like I'm in that space where I'm the diversity representative, I think sometimes I want to not do it or I hold back. But then again, I think the thing that keeps me going is for the folks that are actually listening and are people like me who are interested in the space and are excited and want an insider's perspective on what it's like to walk this path as being like a Black woman in tech and get that perspective.
But at the same time, I think too, we have to keep in mind, we are not like the poster child. Like I'm not the face of the movement. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Not to say that you shouldn't do that, shouldn't pave the way. Like I said, give especially depending on the audience, be the person to bring that content. And, you know, at least you're touching, like, even if it's just a handful of people. But I think sometimes we get into a place where we're kind of like, oh, well, no one else is doing it, so I got to be the voice and the poster child. And it's like,
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
we get sucked into that vortex.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, absolutely.
I can add that for me specifically, what I do is I have to make sure that the conference or me doing it also gives me something at the end of the day, whether it's monetary or just adding something to my portfolio, or like Selam said, also showing people that it's possible to do it as a Black woman as well. So if it's an event that obviously I don't think I'll get any value from, and I'm going to be spending my time, like I remember once someone said I should do a talk and create a new talk just for them. You're not paying me, you're not, I'm not getting anything in return, and it's also online, obviously.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I should. I should do that. So I said no. So in cases like that, yes, I'll decline. But if I find that the conference also has, like, is a community-led conference, they have like diversity program that allows other people that can afford to pay for it to come. All of those are things that I'll consider if I'm going to say yes or no.
One last thing, I consider something else. Yes, Gift, I do pay attention to the diversity tickets. For example, the ballots, they matter a lot. And I also pay attention to, do they have childcare? Are they caring about this? Or are you asking me because I happen to be one of the child-free ones? And the ones that demolish my faith in humanity is where you will get an email saying, can you come? And you can clearly tell you're going to be the token. And they're like, we have had on stage these really well-known people, and they proceed to list like 3 to 5 names. And out of those 3 to 5 names, you at least have 2 or 3 names that are well-known harassers in the industry. And you're like, how can I ensure you're going to keep me safe? Because I don't believe you, and I think you copy-pasted your way to a code of conduct here. Like, this can't be happening. So this is another element I would add. If you know for a fact that you're not necessarily going to be safe, if it's a physical event, please decline. I know it's not always comfortable to say why, so you don't feel forced to. But pay attention to that as well, because I still get hands down my back and men trying to touch me in ways that are not acceptable and gross.
I think Deena said it earlier, and she said she wants to make sure that, like, whatever the event is or the organization, that there is some sort of alignment there, whether that's something that's like benefiting you or something you can stand behind or something. And then with this other side of the coin that Myriam's bringing up is like safety at events. And that's something that I've like harped on and gone, bye baby, my little one's off to school, that I've harped on for an event that we're organizing is, how can we make sure this event is safe? Like the actual nitty gritty details of like, what can we do? Because like, obviously I've been told many times I cannot control what people are going to do. Like, cause I'm putting in these, measurements to make sure situations that I've been through or Kathryn's been through doesn't happen to people that we bring to this event. And, especially like the newbies who are just getting into tech, that I feel like I'm kind of like Sherpaing through this, and I need to make sure. And so I would love for you all to speak a little bit about, before we move on to our next myth, just like, is there anything that events can do to ensure safety for minorities in tech and to kind of push that forward? Because I completely am there with both, like what you guys have said. It's a real thing.
Just yesterday, actually, I was going through a concept called speaker body. I don't think a lot of conferences are utilizing it, but I stumbled upon it. It's essentially a thing where, as a speaker, you have a body. So you know how you have a body when you're joining a new company. So you have one assigned to you. And essentially, they look out for different things. They look out for Say if you're having any inconvenience on stage, if you need help with someone cheering you on, or if you experience anything and you don't feel okay saying it at the point, you can easily speak to that person. The person can also be someone that identifies like you. So I think it would be nice to see more conference organizers uphold that. It's a pretty new. I think it sprung from the conference, something called conference bodies for people that are just going to conferences for the first time, and then they match to people. And then I saw the speaker body one. I think it was an idea from that. So it would be nice to see more conferences actually take that up and pair speakers together. That way, I think being allies to each other, you know that if someone is doing something wrong, you can speak up for that person. Because sometimes, like personally, I find it so difficult to, because I'm a nice person, but sometimes it makes it easier, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't think I've ever seen a buddy system like that for speakers, but I really love that idea.
I'll be the angry old person again. I started going to conferences a decade ago, and I had a conference buddy. He would literally tell me, "Do not go there. This is a problematic conference. Be careful," because he's paid to go to different conferences. So he lets me know on the down low, and he's kept quite a few folks safe. So I know this. But I've also seen and lived through situations where if you signal the problem, they want you to go away. They want you to not be the problem. And I've had a friend of mine, the person who harassed her in the speaker feedback, going, "Are you available? Here's my number. I thought you were really hot." And she was like, "I worked so hard for this talk." And that's all he cared about. Awesome. And his boss is the one who stepped in at the conference. The organizers were all looking at their feet, even though they had like the physical paper showing this. So sometimes, as Gift said, your allies are not necessarily the organizers. It's a sad fact, but it is one. So try to go with a buddy or find someone somewhere where you can talk. And Gift, I am not nice. I am not pleasant. I will speak up. I will be the annoying one who will bring that problem and make it intercontinental, and then the company will react. Because I've had problems with men who will organize diverse events or women-specific events, and I quote, because this is something that I was told. I was one of the lucky candidates. "This is how I find my new girlfriends." You get in an isolated spot like a hotel for 3 to 5 days and things happen. And that is how he picked potential women who would speak. And when I complained, I was told that we cannot fire him. And he said that he was going to stop and that he was sorry. And he proceeded to harass all the other women on his list, thinking it was probably one of them. And no, that none of that is okay. Like, it keeps happening. So the first step, I know it's really sad, but like, as the angry old person, I'm still waiting like Dobie to receive my sock and to be unharassable. Like, I don't understand why this keeps happening to me. When is it over? I was told I reached my expiration date. What's up with this? Like, if anybody can send me the memo, I will take it. But I just want other people to know that it will happen to you because it happens to others, okay? And if it doesn't, count your lucky stars and help someone else out if you see something. Because as recently as last month, I reached out to someone and I went, "This person keeps touching me," and I told them to stop. And the person was like, "Yeah, I saw, and I also told them to stop." And I'm like, "Yeah, none of this is okay. Can you please sit between us?" And this person saved me. And this person wasn't afraid of making that man angry. And he got angry and he went off. Good, bye. Find your safe spot, but if you feel like you're uncomfortable speaking up, it's not just you. It's that maybe the organizers are not making you feel safe because they're either not used to it, they don't pay attention, or they don't care.
There's no good way to transition from like an excellent strong rant like that into the next myth, but I'm going to forge our way forward so that we can keep going. I agree. And it sucks that we all have to deal with that.
Mm.
And I'm going to lead us into our next myth. So, myth number 3. Underrepresentation in tech is all due to the pipeline problem. And until we fix that, there is nothing that we can do to improve D&I on our teams.
I feel like really bad because Kathryn like curated the myths. And when I was like proofreading it, I was like, that's not a core belief I hold. What? Like, so I really am like scared to debunk this one because I was like, it is like in my head. Like, I don't know. I guess. Okay. So yes, please.
Oh, you're saying this is one that you think there's some truth in it.
Yeah, I was the one touting this. Like, until we fix our schools, I'm that person. But no, there are some facts here as to why, like, even like graduates, for instance, like in the tech industry, that ratio isn't represented in the working industry. And so like that would be a perfect example, a factual example of the pipeline not being the problem. So, but no, I am guilty of believing this myth. Absolutely. So does anyone have some good tidbits to say about myth number 3?
Yeah, I have some thoughts around this actually. One of the other issues that I feel like is around is retention. So even just getting these people in the space is great, but then once they're there, having this sense of like not feeling like you belong will turn people off from continuing to stay in the space and find other better, more inclusive communities to be a part of that aren't necessarily tech. And then as a result, it just looks like even if companies or folks or teams are trying to get people into their teams and organizations, they're not doing enough to actually keep them there and incentivize them to stay there and continue working there because it's either unsafe, there's a lack of diversity, there are just microaggressions, there's just other problems just within the team itself or within the organization itself that turn people away once they're in.
Agreed. I think that's a great point. We focus a lot on getting people in and recruiting women and recruiting members of underrepresented groups. And then there's very little care taken for the actual experience of those folks once they are a part of the team. And that stings. You get disillusioned pretty quickly.
Sometimes it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you can tell that there's outside pressure or there's pressure within the company to be quote unquote more diverse. And then they will hire people and go, see, they don't tough it out. It doesn't work. It's not our company culture. It's not our fault. And you're like, where do I begin? So just thank you so much for stating this as articulately as you did, because it's a thing.
Oh, this comment is so interesting. Erin talking about an alumni chapter of her university with a salary transparency sheet, which I've never seen before, but I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's cool.
This is very cool. And yeah, folks get hired, the university is proud of it, touting it, but no one is kind of talking about the truths of who's staying and what they're making and what it looks like to actually be employed and whether that employment itself is fair. So.
Yeah, even to that comment, we talk about everyone knows there's a pay gap, if it's from a gender perspective or a race perspective, but no one's really talking about the solutions to close that gap. And even as an ally, sharing your salary, especially like how you started and when you get promoted, like how much you're being promoted, it's so helpful. We've always been taught not to talk about those things and not to share those things with our colleagues. The reason they tell us not to do that is because then we can't see the gap. And so making that a little bit more transparent would be extremely helpful. And then also to the point of getting people or underrepresented individuals into a company, there's that piece of fostering inclusion. And I don't know I guess for me, fostering inclusion being that I'm a Scrum Master and I work with teams. So it's like, I know how to bring people together because that's part of my job. But I feel like it's a lost art form. People act like they don't know how to get people together and just have fun or make someone feel included. Everyone has something that, like all of us ladies have something that we can relate to and connect with, even if it's just like being a woman. But everyone has different interests and different hobbies. And there's something that you can use to be a connective piece for someone else. We have to start using that and then building off of that. Because even if I say, let's just say I like sports, and then one of you likes sports, we might not like the same sport, but it's like you can start a conversation and grow that relationship. But we don't grow relationships in the workplace to make people feel welcomed anymore. Like I said, it's a lost art form. And I really wish we would bring that back.
And there's go right ahead. I talk too much.
Sorry. I was gonna say I think it's also a little bit more challenging too to create this sense of like community online post COVID, and trying to figure out ways to make people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. I think is one of the many challenges to getting folk to stay or increasing retention. And so I'm curious to hear like other people's thoughts on how they've created the sense of like community and like belonging in this like digital space. And yeah, just like what are their thoughts around that?
Yeah, Overland Gamer jumping in with a very relevant comment at just the right time. Kind of same thing. Has this improved any, or is it getting worse because we've moved online?
I think I can say for me, it's a lot more difficult. Like, for example, before the pandemic at my previous job, I could go to the office, I could meet my colleagues, but right now I work fully remote. And yeah, I don't get to see the people that I work with very often. Of course, once in a while, you'll have the opportunity to meet, but it's just, it's very different coming from like the experience of having to work closely together in person and then moving to fully remote. I love remote work. Don't get me wrong. I love the opportunity to be flexible. But yeah, when you start thinking about the personal touch, like this person I speak to every day, every week, do I really know them? You know? But yeah, I don't think the pandemic has helped a lot in that area. I've seen a lot of different ways people are trying to make this work. I remember there was a time when we would like do our meetings in a platform that allows you be there in person, like in an animated form.
Oh yeah.
That I can't remember what it was called again.
I've done some of those as well.
Yeah,
where you
that
like walk
was
around a
like
little
a
virtual
virtual
office.
place. That was fun. I'll say I think it's also making additional activities around things you could do based on interest. So if you have some colleagues that are into like crocheting, you could create a group, talk virtually about that. It doesn't give you back that same experience of being in person, but it makes up for it.
Yeah. Myriam?
So I'm going to bring along something unusual, but depending on where you're from, and depending on if you're neurospicy or not, the way you communicate is also very, very different, right? So you can hear me, I talk a lot, nonstop. It never stops, even in my sleep. So it's one of those things where you will connect with certain colleagues because of that. So you have to foster communication styles, like understand that people communicate differently and they also have different boundaries when you're online. So that colleague that keeps messaging you at 2 a.m. with shower ideas, like, I mean, cool, but don't respond, like, make it clear. Another element that I think is very important is to develop your own inside jokes as a team. So I'm going to pass the baton to Alyssa and Kathryn, who have a lot to tell us about chickens.
Oh yeah, I think you can see it's under me, right?
Yeah,
There's a little chicken.
We could love chickens here.
I wouldn't say he's like corporately designed, sanctioned. I wouldn't say that. I think he has made his way into our lives very naturally.
But I do.
The right term is corporate fan fiction.
Oh my, that's how I'm calling it from now on.
Oh my god, exactly.
But there was some truth that, like, when I joined the team, the chicken was an inside joke that already existed.
Oh no, it was? Oh,
absolutely.
No,
which is okay, because I felt really welcomed. And when I joined the team, everyone was excited to clue me in on the chicken, and I got effectively a care package a literal in the mail with like a ball cap and I think like
Chickens,
a stuffy,
yeah.
like a bunch of like chicken themed goods that were impossible to explain to my husband.
You were like, obviously, I'm doing my job. Don't question.
And I think the most horrifying over the head chicken mask I've ever witnessed in my life, which I immediately threw away because I was terrified of it.
Rude.
It's scary. I wish I could communicate to you how
terrifying it is. We all got different swag. It was just really like absolutely random chicken gear they could find online. So I nobody else knows how terrifying this mask is. So I believe her. Oh, yeah.
But the point being, I felt really welcomed. And it was a way like I was immediately clued into the team. I was immediately part of a joke. Like I had that, I would wear the hat or whatever to be like, I got my chicken hat. And like, yeah, it was silly and it's ridiculous, and saying it out loud makes me sound like I'm a few marbles short.
And that's perfect. That's the point.
It's a lot of fun. And in return, I got to introduce the group to the dusty stick emoji in Slack, which no one had ever used.
Hadn't
somehow.
heard of it. Yeah. I wonder,
cultural exchange.
I started remote like 6 years ago, so I had like that separation that Gift was talking about. Like I had that pre-pandemic because it was like, you know, I'm no longer in the office. Yeah. I'm figuring this out. And I actually had a weird experience where in the beginning of remote work, I didn't have an amazing leader and I didn't feel included, and I felt very like singled out for a lot of different reasons. But then the management totally changed, and all of a sudden I was way better at my job and I got a raise immediately. And so it's really interesting because it was completely separate from remote work versus like being in person, that I all of a sudden found connection, and I found, you know, like I belonged, and I felt like, and so I feel like I wanted to ask Kathryn, do you think, because our team is unique as a DevRel team where we do, like, I get to connect with them at events, maybe, you know, once every 3 months. And so I do have that in person where, you know, like jokes can be created, ideas can be spun up, we can connect on a person to person basis. And then we go back to, you know, our separate villages and our remote. So I'm wondering if perhaps our remote team works so freakishly well because we're not truly remote, right? We have those occasional bubbles of like time together. Or do you think it really is just about personalities coming together and making an effort to include everybody? Like,
I think personally it's about making an effort more so. It's nice to see people in person, but I also started working remote pre-pandemic. And so similarly, I've been on teams that worked really well and teams that didn't work really well. And my unpopular hot take on this is that it has a lot to do with how much time you spend with your cameras on in a meeting. And that makes me sound like such a boomer, and I'm really sorry. But the team I was on that clicked the best, we had a stand-up, a cameras on stand-up every morning. And it was 5 to 10 minutes and then we were on with our day. But 5 to 10 minutes of personal connection every morning made a difference in our team. And I regret to say it because I also don't want to have my camera on at 8 a.m, but sadly, it made an impact.
So we just got raided. I think we should do a reintroduction. Thank you, Fritz, so much for the raid. We got like 75 people joining us. So hi, everybody. Welcome. We are doing a diversity and inclusion right now, a panel, and then we're going to do some one-on-ones following this. But we are so happy to have you, and things might get spicy, but please share your thoughts and questions in the comments and we will try to address them as we move through the content. So welcome, everybody.
On that note, I think we have time for one more myth before it's time to break it out into one-on-ones. So I'm going to go ahead and hit us with one that I think we talked a little bit about, but I want to dive into a little deeper. Myth number 4, I don't have any biases, so there's no way that I'm encoding any of my personal biases in what I build. I, an engineer, am completely objective at all times. Oh, whoops, wrong myth in the chat.
Oh, whoops, wrong myth. Whoops. I love you all. That was my paste error. All right, I'll get the real one. Here's the real one. No, the personal bias one. There we go.
Yeah. Who's jumping in?
I can speak on this a little bit. I was actually going to say, I think this is so funny because I think that the bias begins before the coding step, even just in the design step. the bias is there, and everything is more so a domino effect after that. So, I mean, as an engineer, we have to create a design doc describing pretty much how we're going to build, what we're going to build, and all the possible problems with it, possible ways to build it, and things like that. And so we take a lot of time and care in figuring out the how to build it. But when it's only engineers or tech bros that are really looking at the work and focused on, is it robust? Is it the fastest? Can it actually just do what it needs to do in the bare bones sense? There's so much room for error. And again, just like the lack of diversity on the table of people who are reading the design doc, building the actual product and things like that, definitely result in biases just interwoven into the actual product, and even before that step, into the design doc.
Yeah, I'm cracking up with this comment. I don't have any biases, says person with inherent bias. More news at 11. But no, I think you're right that this starts as early in the process as honestly like the conception of the idea, right?
Yeah.
And that when we're trying to target what problem we think we're solving and what problems need solving, already we're bringing into account our own biases.
I think that everyone has bias, whether they like it or not, whether they know it. A very relatable example is what we spoke about with the hand dryer example. It's pretty evident the people that built that obviously did not account for, other people that are not like them. So I feel like as developers, engineers, when we're creating products, it's important to do assign time to check, test properly if other people are experiencing or going to use the product the same way we have been testing. So if I'm trying to assess a product, for example, and I have maybe ADHD or I have some color blindness, for example, am I going to have the same experience with you, the developer that created that product? Possibly no. So it's important. That's why accessibility is very important, which is always an afterthought. It's very sad, but I think these things are very important. So we need to, as developers, be making more efforts. Yeah, there.
I have a terrible story, and I think it illustrates this quite well. Coming into Canada as a new immigrant, I was told, you are going to listen to marketers and developers talk about the new banking app we're going to do, because I worked in a bank, and it's for newcomers like me. And I managed to not say anything until the end, so I was proud of myself. That was an accomplishment, but it was the same thing. We're going to take this Korean family, get them at the airport, film it all, let them open the app. We're going to gift them with a MasterCard. We're taking them to a hockey game. We're giving them a Canada Goose coat. And it's all happy. And I hear the next persona where I'm like, okay. So it's this single French guy. He's a journalist. His girlfriend is in Canada. We pick him up from the airport. We film. We give him the coat. We take him to the hockey game. Same thing again. He gets a MasterCard. All of them got MasterCards. All of them got those huge coats, and all of them like hockey, apparently. And then it ends with an application where you have like a Google Maps thing where you can find, if you're anywhere in the world, you will find your bank. We are here for you. And I raised my hand. I was like, some of us come in the summer, right? Like, we don't need the coat, right? Some of us come from cold countries as well. That none of these people are actually qualified for the MasterCard because that specific MasterCard is not even accessible to them with their non-existent credit score. And if I'm from the Philippines or France and I log on to this app, it's going to tell me I have 0 banks near me. So what's the whole point again? I mean, I understand from a code standpoint, it's intriguing. From a marketing standpoint, I know you want to give out the codes and take them to hockey games, but ultimately, what does it do for people like me, the ones you want to sell this to? You are selling us something we don't even have access to. And everybody got super quiet. And then the agency person asked for another 20K from the budget so they could rethink this and retool it just a little bit. But at no point did he say this was a bad idea or that they would like rethink the whole thing. They were just like, more money to tack on something that can retrofit this experience. That's it.
Oh.
That is rough. You were right.
But if you want a Canada Goose, I mean, it is a nice coat. It's problematic on its own right, but apparently it's emblematic of Canada.
Yeah, I think there's so many times where retrofitting the, like, oh, you're right. We didn't think of other people. Like, and we're all just like looking at this like Frankenstein of a thing and we're like, yes, ship it, right? But I get it. At the end of the day, there's not infinite time or resources, but I do think if we started earlier in the process, then maybe that would help, you not reaching the end of the line with an inviable solution.
I would say
Simple things like accents. I have a lot of French friends. It's not Stephanie, it's Stéphanie with an A. I saw someone in the chat saying they had an umlaut in their name. Good luck with many apps. You don't exist.
No, I laugh quite a bit. When I got married, I changed my name from Grayson to Grayson Nanz, and I didn't choose to hyphenate it. And I wish I could go back in time and tell past Kathryn that was a poor choice. I was even already a software engineer. Don't ask me why I thought having a blank space in the middle of my last name was the move, but I did it, and I fight with it in every single form fill. So the assumptions and the biases, that's a great example, frankly, of bias that we bring towards what is a name and what qualifies as a name and what characters and symbols are part of people's names. And there's a fantastic list someone shared with me that was like 40 assumptions that computer scientists make about names. And it's one of my favorite things on the internet because it's these really simple statements, and I'm going to find it.
Oh, that sounds so good. Yes.
Other people keep talking about other things while I'm looking up this thing, because that's going to be a really boring stream of me Googling things.
I'm actually curious, Gift, do you ever get like alerts saying your name is not valid?
Not really. The thing that I get most, which is of course okay, is people pronouncing or spelling it wrong a lot. My last name,
like with a Y, or
no, my last name. I don't have it here. Yeah, it's pronounced Egwuenu and it's spelled with an E, but it's pronounced A. So yeah, every time I have to correct people, but it's fine.
I feel like for a long time, one of the issues that I've noticed was for names, there was a character count limit. So accounting only for people with like traditionally shorter names, or just like Americanized names are generally just shorter than other types of names. And because of that, some people can't spell their full first, middle, or last name, or just first and last name, and then it becomes like a huge problem. And so
Canadian Visa, they made up my name. They like cut it off, and people kept calling me at work because they used my Visa thing. They're like, Eliza. I'm like, not answering because that's not my name. That's actually my middle name amputated, and they got mad that I wouldn't answer, and I didn't understand. Like, it causes problems, genuine problems. If you want to file a police report, you will have police going like, my partner's name is Joachim, and they would look and they would go, Joachim. That's very strange. He's like, yeah, they took off the M because Canadian immigration decided that. Like, so thank you. I feel seen. I suffered through this for 10 years.
I'm going to interrupt real quick. Gift has to go ahead and jump off to make it to another thing. But thank you so much for joining us.
We appreciate
We're so
you.
glad
Thank
you were
you so
here.
much.
And if anyone else needs to jump, is that all? Right now, how late are we going on the panel, Kathryn?
I think we probably need to just about wrap it up.
Oh, okay.
But,
Okay.
Real quick before you jump, Gift, if people are interested in finding you, following you, hearing more of what you do, where can they do that?
Sure. I use the handle Laura Gifts on Twitter, and on other platforms I'm using the gift code. So the gift code.
Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time, and
Thank
nice
you for
meeting
joining
you
us.
all as well. All right, bye.
Sorry, I'm laughing a little bit at this comment that just came in. Big long panel by a horse that would me into geeking out on something Trek related, which is what I'm infamous for as a mega Star Trek fan. They're calling me out in the chat, saying how long before Kathryn gives in about Trek. Thank you all for hanging with us. We are here with Selam and excited to dig into some questions around ethics and bias in computer science. So real quick, for those who were not originally here when you first introduced yourself at the beginning of the group panel, can you go ahead and reintroduce yourself for our new viewers?
Sure. So as mentioned, I'm Selam. I'm a software engineer and I currently work at a medtech company. And I'm just super passionate and excited about DEI, ethics in tech, and just really how we can create a more well-rounded tech space. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks. Thank you. We are so excited to have you here with us. So I'm going to go ahead and jump us right into the questions because I found that an hour sounds like a lot of time and then it never actually is. That discussion panel went by speed of light. I felt like
didn't even hit all the myths.
We never do. I'm such an anxious person. I will create a huge list of like an outline, everything I want to hit, and I know it's going to be more than we'll ever cover, and I just want it. I just want it there for me.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about ethics in the context of like computer science, development, engineering, maybe even more broadly the tech industry, can you kind of give us an idea of what it is that we're talking about kind of specifically?
Well, to me, it just means that we're building products or just building things with an ethical framework or moral principles in mind. And I know those things can kind of be different for different people. And then even from like a personal level, it could be different on an organizational level. But I think just reflecting on what we're building and really focusing on the why aspect as opposed to the how aspect is something I think about deeply. As an engineer, we focus a lot of time on how do we build it? How do we make it fast, very robust and things like that, but not necessarily enough time on why are we building this? What communities are we affecting? Is there any negative impact that we're not really considering? And so I think in this space of like ethical technology, it's really considering both of those, the why and the how equally when building, designing, and even ideating.
So do you think, or maybe rather, let me rephrase that. What do you think is involved in being an ethical technologist? It's just the act of thinking about those things and parsing that out before you start to build, or are there like actions? If someone was going to call themselves an ethical technologist, what would you assume that they do?
I think they take special care in the steps leading up to actually building the product. And by special care, I really just mean identifying the communities and the people that might be involved in this space and really thinking about how can we even just in the design process and in the building process, how do we create a well-rounded team and consider all of the edge cases and just even the folk that could be, again, emphasizing on like the negative component, like negatively affected by what we're building. Because I think it's really easy, especially in tech, to just be really excited about building something and rushing into that building step. I mean, one of the most famous lines is move fast, break things.
I was just about to bring that up. Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of merit in that, in the sense of just constantly iterating and building off of it, making mistakes and things like that. And there's nothing wrong in that. But I think there's also a lot of importance before we release something out into the world that we take special attention and care in how we build it and design it for the communities and people that we want to support.
Definitely. And I feel like it can be hard to sometimes be the person on the team that is trying to slow other people down. I've been that person sometimes, and you're like, I feel like you're always raising a flag over something and you're always going, wait, let's think about this, or do we consider that? It can be kind of a drag.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a lot harder, especially for user-facing products where there are like children involved or just like teens involved. Like when you think about like social media platforms that are being built and trying to build something that's really fun and exciting and meaningful for kids is one thing. And then, but also the things that we're building, are we sucking them into this like metaverse portal and where it's just them on their phones or on their laptops. Is that the right thing to do? Is there something better? Are there ways we can connect people in real life too? So there's just like a lot of, this is just one example, just using social media.
Yeah.
That's the easiest one, but this is just one example of something to consider.
Mm.
And it oftentimes is really hard to slow down product development when there are deadlines and like other things that people care about or find to be more important than slowing down and really reflecting on the work they're building.
Yeah. I'm interested. I really like that you brought up children and teens as an audience, right? Which is something that I don't think, unless we're on a team that is specifically building an application for children, it's not something we think about, that a lot of what we build is used by children, even if they're not the target audience. And Alyssa, I'm actually really interested for you to jump in on this because you're a parent. That's not an experience that I have. And so when I'm thinking about building for children, it's a little bit more abstract than, I know your kid's a little on the young age for,
No,
I
but
don't think he has
still-
a social media account, but I bet he
Yeah.
has logged some screen time. Not
He
in a
has,
bad way, it's
yeah.
just in a fact of life way.
And I think, with Selam, like talking about, okay, but should we be like, getting the children like their time and taking that up? I think it's really more on the family dynamic for gating that, because yes, it has to be considered on the product side, but also I think every family has their own rules related to technology with age and with restrictions of time. Our only time that he gets iPad time, as we call it, is in the car. And we just found it easier to deal with a toddler in the car with an iPad, but it's still locked down. And it's just things like kids YouTube, which God bless kids YouTube. Oh my God. So for those of you who don't know, YouTube has an app called Kids YouTube that is only content appropriate for kids. And I've watched with him, and I'm obviously like in the front seat listening. So, I know if there's something weird come on screen, but I've, listened to hours of kids YouTube, and it is all very educational. I'm like, oh, we're teaching that now? I'm glad they're tackling it, because there's like, he's 3, right? Like, so, but no, I think it is really touchy, especially whenever things need to be gated for children. And I am so appreciative of the teams that do it right, because there are even just little things like games, for instance, that have ads, and it's a game targeted for like toddlers, but it has an ad, and it always, to this day, I'm like, Zach, we're developers, we've got to rebuild this game without the ad, because it trips him up and it gets him in this weird cycle where he can no longer doodle, and that's all he wants to do is doodle. But download 5 other doodle apps that have no ads. Unacceptable, right? So I think I'm very grateful for development teams or design teams that have taken that into thought, because it's very obvious. But I have this thing in my head, whether it's for children, whether it's minorities, whatever it is that we're considering, of like, is this feasible, like money wise? Is this feasible time wise? Like, to truly be conscious of this in all parts of the process, to change the way you do things. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how we make this bite-sized enough that companies actually take the bait, right? Like, because it sounds like such a daunting task to me as the individual developer. So I'm just imagining as like, if you were a part of like a team of developers or a team of designers, and it was your job to like start implementing ethics on your team and to start implementing thoughtfulness. Like, I don't know. I get...
That feels like an intimidating charge to you, is what you're saying.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah.
It feels like it would be something that would maybe get hard to get buy-in on.
Well, I think that we're not reinventing the wheelhouse, right? No one's asking someone to be the source of all truths, all knowledge and everything. So I think that there's a lot of resources just out there on what people have done in their communities and spaces and workplaces that have worked for them and why it's worked for them. And I think that just picking up and 1 or 2 things from each of those like articles or books or whatever you read and just suggesting it and like implementing it. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could just be one additional step in the design process, which might be, have we considered who this is affecting? Or maybe it's including in the design doc the people that it might harm. What are the consequences? Because we already have to discuss edge cases, right? And like,
Mm.
what are the things that could go wrong from a technical standpoint and how we're going to fix it if something were to go wrong. There are already these technical guardrails that are up.
Mm.
And I think that there are ways to create ethical guardrails in a sense that honestly, nobody has to reinvent this. This is already out there on the internet. There are so many excited, passionate technologists out there who have written bite-sized, tangible pieces of work. And it's just a matter of reading it and just bringing it up to stand up, bringing it up to a conversation. And I think there are certain fields where it makes it a lot easier and more obvious where this could be included. For example, if you're in AI is like a huge topic now, or like things like
Oh man.
or things like social media, huge topic.
Ooh, I want to dig into that one. Finish your sentence and then I'm coming back to AI.
That's like a huge topic. So I mentioned I work in med tech, so like patient care and quality of care and like
huge. Yeah.
making sure that we keep things reliable and transparent and honest, and like how we at the end of the day helping the patient and making that experience better for them in this space and in this context. So I think like in certain fields, it's way more obvious where there could be a problem and what questions we should be asking ourselves. It's just a matter of doing the asking and having those discussions.
Yeah, I feel that I think I've talked about this on stream before, but for a while I worked at a company that did pharmaceutical advertising. And that was a wild ride from an ethics standpoint. So I feel some of that. And when you're there in the middle of something like that, it does feel very obvious, and it's something you're contending with every day. And a lot of it, even comes down to there's some ethics that have been federally mandated in the states in terms of the way that you place information and what you have to disclose and what you don't have to disclose, but not every industry has that. In fact, a lot of the tech industries are far less regulated than pharmaceuticals, which admittedly a high bar, but it can be challenging. I mean, there's some comments in the chat around ChatGPT. Yeah, love me some ChatGPT. Holy heck, it can be cleverly biased. Yeah, and then joking, what about iRobot? but yeah, I'm interested, especially AI has been everywhere, and we're seeing a lot of people that are starting to do kind of these photos that have been manipulated or created by AI, or we're seeing chatbot kind of interactions where a question is asked and an answer is given, and that answer is just kind of assumed to be truth. And we're starting to incorporate that AI into what we build, possibly without kind of vetting it. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on what's happening with AI right now, what we can do to do AI better, or should we not be messing with this at all yet?
There's so many interesting questions around this topic. And thankfully, there are people who are way smarter than me who have actually dove deep into this problem space to really ask these kinds of questions. And I think it's hard, honestly, because on one end, this is cool but scary. It's like, wow, we have the capacity to build something like this. But then also it brings to question what's next from like an educational perspective. For example, I think my friend and I were talking about like the use of ChatGPT and how students have possibly even used it for just work or just like writing. So is writing going to be like a lost art form, or just knowing how to write in more than like 3 sentences or 100 characters, things like that, where are things like we asked ourselves, and like, this is so frightening. And even though sometimes like when people type things into ChatGPT, you're like, wow, this pretty much articulated exactly what I wanted to get across. It's also kind of frightening because I think one beauty of having like writing and work like that, it's having your voice on paper. And now this is like a robot's voice or something like that. And I don't know, it's even hard to even express it. Like a AI's voice that is now like expressing the thoughts that you wanted to express, kind of thing, which was just one example that my friends and I were talking about. But yeah, it's really hard. I think this problem space is really hard, and it requires not only people who know how to build this technology into the conversation, but just also other people who aren't even in tech or tech adjacent, just people who can be affected should be part of the conversation. I'd be really curious to know how artists or writers or people in that like creative space feel about this work. Maybe it's supporting them, maybe it's helping them get ideas, but also maybe it's just taking away from their work or the value that came from someone coming up with this themselves, you know?
It has been really interesting to watch this move through the art community, which is something that I'm still tangentially connected to. For those who may not know, I went to school for art, a fine arts degree. So I have a lot of friends and a lot of folks that are still in that community that I'm close with. And it's interesting because the most common thing that I've heard from them, which again, not a scientific study, just a group of people that I'm friends with, but that they're interested in the tech. But right now, a lot of these image generators and art generators are just kind of scraping art without artist permission. So if it's been hosted on the internet somewhere, it's been scraped into a database, which is being used to generate these things that you could say, create art in the style of Picasso or whatever, you know, and that's not a great example because he does have some stuff in the public domain.
Right.
But artists that don't necessarily, right? It doesn't matter. And there's very few of these image generators that I would say do have an ethical database, right? Where artists have opted in, have contributed their work, have said like, yes, this is cool. You can use these pieces. Don't use these pieces, you know, because when you have a database where everyone's opted in, I think it's cool as hell, frankly. That's my professional opinion, is cool as hell. But yeah, to me, it does pose an ethical concern when artist work is being used to generate other work without their permission or consent. So it's a line, it's a fine line, which I assume is the case with most of these kind of ethical quandaries.
I'm always curious to see what the next generation of like plagiarism checkers will look like in this like space. And how they'll be able to figure out what's authentic and what's not. I don't know. It's just really hard. Like this whole problem space is really, really hard from a technical perspective, but also from like a moral perspective. And I think it's fine sometimes to not build certain things, just to not open up Pandora's box. But that's just me personally. Then it just brings out more questions and less answers, and things just become a lot murkier. But it's also, there is some, I have to give where credit is due, there is some just really cool things that people know how to build, and it's like frighteningly awesome, I guess, to say the least.
Yes.
Did you hear the story about the AI recently, that they gave more power than they've ever, like computing power than they've ever given an AI? My husband was reading me this story and he like looked hurt, like shocked on the couch. It was like last week. And I go, are you okay? What are you, like, someone die in the family? And he was like, no, it's just developers doing what developers shouldn't do. And I'm like, what? And I need to find the article, but he said they gave this AI more computing power than they've ever given AI. And they spread it across multiple servers. And they wanted to see if it would start writing rules so that it couldn't die, like so that it couldn't be shut down. And it did. And they said they're like, and I quote, it was harder than it should have been to take this thing offline. And I'm like, why are we doing this? And, you know, my husband and I joke, we're both developers and we're like, we love our robot overlords, right? Because we have Google Home and other always listening technology. And so we just, I think, yeah, there's with ethics, especially with things like that. I'm like, why are we playing with fire? Okay, it's fine. Yeah. So
I think it's interesting. I'm going to reel this in a little bit.
Yeah,
but not much. But I think it's interesting because I think those kinds of big questions are ones that we often kind of consider when we think about ethics in tech. I think we often think about some of those around like data collection or, you know, creating sentient AI that will not let itself be turned off, hypothetically. But I think sometimes that can actually I don't want to say be more hurtful than helpful, because it's still worth considering. But I think it can almost be distracting, right? Because I'm of the opinion that like the little ethical choices that we make along the way when we're building something stack up, and those can have huge impact. And sometimes we don't assign them the weight that we should be, because we're like, well, I'm not building, you human enslaving robot AI overlords. Like,
so I'm fine, right? Why do I need to take ethics into
the way that
consideration?
I build this form, or the way that I configure this algorithm doesn't matter, And I think we are quick to assume that what we build doesn't have the effect that it might. I want to return to one of the things you talked about earlier, which is like taking some time to consider the ways that your products might or potentially could hurt folk. And one of the things that you told me offline before this chat was you mentioned the concept of a pre-mortem, which I really, really liked. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about what a pre-mortem is and how it works as an ethical check.
Yeah, so I think, for anyone who doesn't know, there are postmortems that are just very traditional spaces that people who were involved in a project come together and talk about the things that went wrong, things we could have done better, and just use it as a learning stepstone for the next project or next thing that has to be built. And so when Kathryn and I were having this conversation, I was saying that we should have this concept of a pre-mortem where we kind of think about, okay, what could go wrong? And then what are we building? Who was actually involved in the building process? And really just reflecting on each person's role. And if we notice there's 10 engineers, and then there's only engineers that are involved in this conversation, or, maybe there isn't someone directly part of the communities that we're affecting, or, those types of questions, and trying to get answers from that exercise can happen before we even build before the design doc, during the design doc process. Because I feel like a lot of these types of conversations are happening from a technical perspective in the design doc phase, and in that step where you're trying to figure out, okay, what are we building and how are we building it? But interwoven into that conversation, we should also think about, why are we building it, beyond increasing this metric, trying to build this cool feature to, again, like for some sort of bottom line that is related to money. So thinking about the people that we're going to affect and harm possibly is really important in that pre-mortem, if you will, phase.
Yeah.
Does
really
anyone ask that question? Because I don't know if I've been a part of a team that is cool, so we're making X for this reason, for these people, with these considerations. I don't know if I've ever been in a team where they're like, who is this going to harm? Is that a question that all teams are asking themselves?
I don't think it's necessarily directly said that forward. Maybe we consider
I think it would be nice if it was, though.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and throw out real quick. I don't know that this is happening, but I do think that it should.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that when answering that question, the fear, I think, is that, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this feature, even though it would make us a lot of money, is like the bottom line concern. And I think that's why folks might not want to ask these questions or have these types of conversations, because it would either result in money not being made, ads not being put out, which results in money not being made. And so that's why those conversations might not happen. But I feel like when they don't happen, there are even greater ramifications. Like we were talking about the hand dryer issue earlier on the stream.
Can you recap that real quick, just because we've changed segments?
Oh,
I know folks have joined. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier in the stream, we were talking about when hand dryers were initially built, they weren't considering how the different skin tones that might be actually wanting to dry their hands. Like not everyone has lighter skin tones that were accounted for. And some folks are now, or there's a lot of videos, honestly, on Twitter everywhere where people are just putting their hands into the dryer and there's nothing happening. Or even just when you have those like automatic like hand washing, that's another example where it seems like none of them work, or you just have to constantly wave your hand under vigorously to get anything to happen. And so like these are examples of experiences where this one large community wasn't accounted for in the process, and they had to do recalls. And so now they're losing millions of dollars. There's bad publicity and bad press and things like that. And not to say we should be doing things in the name of press or in optics, but or even just in the name of money. But I think ultimately, if we want to build something and we're thinking about the users who are going to have a better experience because of what we built, I think having a more well-rounded and thoughtful step before the building process will create a situation where we don't have to do all these like crazy recalls and things like that.
Yeah. Ultimately, that almost always ends up creating a better product at the end of the day. So it's interesting when we were talking about this issue with the hand dryers, it made me think there was a very similar issue that happened long before the internet, right? Around Kodak film and the way that the film was created and meant to be. They graded things, so I believe it was called a Shirley card. Is how it showed film developers the right like processing time, and so when film was correctly developed and exposed, right, to reveal the image. All of that testing was done like around keyed off this image of a white woman that had been taken. And it didn't reflect darker skin tones. And it also, as it turns out, didn't reflect darker images of just about anything. And, you know, people were, of course, wildly upset. But in addition to, you know, not showing folks, just like individuals, people of color, it also didn't take good pictures in dark rooms. It didn't take good pictures of dark objects. Like, it was not a good product and got pulled back and recalled and reconfigured, and similarly lost a lot of money and had to redevelop this whole situation and send out new kind of processing key cards and film and all of that, because they didn't take the time to test it. They tested it in one very specific limited situation.
So do you both think that it is myth then that you will either lose money or not make as much money if you are taking like ethics and diversity into account in the beginning? You both think that it is more profitable and more moral?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's ever a situation where if you think a little bit more deeply about what you're about to do next, it ever results in something bad. I feel like most missteps are when you just didn't take that extra second to think about it, think about the consequences of one's actions. So absolutely.
I think it's a question of playing the short game versus the long game, right? Because, right, we talk about the move fast and break things. It became so infamous, right? Skipping those steps will get you there faster. And there might be some ground that you gain temporarily in being the first thing on the market. But if you're not the best thing on the market, users will move.
How long will you be there? Yeah.
I mean, again, you say what you will, move fast and break things was famously a Facebook thing, right? And they had the market for a minute, and now they do not. And I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, thinking about whether you're going to be a flash in the pan and whether the thing is get there quick, make whatever money we can and get out, which has its own ethical questions, right? But if you're building something that you want to make money and to be something that sticks around and has an influence on people and becomes part of people's lives, then yeah, right? Robert Tables brings up a good one in the chat. Oh, not that one. Yeah, that is a good point, but this is the good point that I was thinking of, right? Face recognition and digital photography, right? And if you had a digital camera that didn't do that well, you eventually probably replaced it with something better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, right, cameras are now, they say, the primary selling point of smartphones, because we've gotten to a point where the tech is all the same.
Yeah.
So a camera that can make, you know, night mode adjustments, that can do XYZ, those are now winning. And the first person to get the smartphone out is not necessarily the winner. It's the person who's now taking the time and care to create a product that is well-rounded, that is inclusive, that is usable by everyone.
Absolutely.
Those are the people that win the long race.
Yeah.
That's my rant. I ranted for too long on a segment that was not mine. But
no worries. No, you brought up a lot of good points. I mean, it's the camera alone, there's just a lot to flesh out in it because it's our image, our identity, how people perceive us and how we perceive ourselves. So we obviously want something that really reflects what we think we look like. And in an age of like, especially like filters and things like that too, that also like warp our perception of self. It's like really important to have at least like one quality like camera experience where you feel like this is just true to who I am, like raw. And those who are like in the space or like in the camera tech space, it becomes like an increasingly challenging question to ask themselves. How do we create an experience where people feel like this is who they are without filters and things like that? And yeah, it can definitely be challenging, especially as folk get younger and younger when they get their phones.
Yeah.
So then people are now engaging with their image and their identity being put out there way earlier than other folks did beforehand. So I think it's a very difficult space to be in. But again, handling those initial steps with like care and thought and some sort of ethical framework in mind, I think will definitely help.
It has been so interesting to me to see, and I hate to use the like Gen Z, millennial, whatever. It's been interesting to watch the younger generation grow up in this context and the attitude that they have. I see a lot more folks on TikTok or whatever that want filters that are not going to change their face dramatically, right? They want things that maybe just add a little bit of makeup or maybe brighten the room around them or do something funny or silly. It's like a game, but it's not changing the way that they look. Whereas when I was growing up, that like Facetune level filter was all the rage. And we've kind of come about face on that. I think it's interesting. You mentioned before that, right? Like the ethical framework that anyone's bringing to a specific problem is going to be different per person. And I think that's a place where we've seen that change where like, you know, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if filters were doing any harm, I probably would have laughed, you know? They're just for fun. They're silly. You know, they make me look like I've got a full face of makeup on. And now I will see folks kind of push back on it and be like, did you see how this made my nose look thinner? Did you see how this, you know, changed the shape, the angles of my face, the way that it changed the shape of my eyes, you know, and made me not look like myself? I don't know where I was going with that. I find it deeply interesting, the different ethical standards that we have, whether we grew up with tech and in what part of the tech advancement we grew up in.
It becomes really difficult. But it's part of the job, right?
Yes.
So it's part of
100%.
the process of just like building things and putting it out there into the world. Because also another hard thing about being an engineer, I think, is when you build something and then you put it out to the world, the way you intended it to be used might not necessarily be used in that way. So there's a lot of thought and consideration around how could someone break this or use this differently, which I think makes it super important for like user research and a lot of user testing and figuring out the other million paths that could have been taken that we as the builders and designers didn't really consider.
100%. I think how can people abuse this is a question that does not get asked enough as we build. Genuinely, it sounds so negative and so miserable, but there's always a way that someone can manipulate something that you've created, even if it was created with the best of intentions, and use it in a way that is harmful. So, Alyssa, I jumped on you. Oh, and then I'm gonna shut up.
No, I was gonna say after asking how could this harm someone, the next question is how could this be abused? These are just the hard hitting questions, I guess, that have to be asked. But yeah, someone else was gonna say something.
Oh, so I was going to mention there were two questions in chat that I wanted to weave into our conversation. Overland Gamer was asking about bringing up TikTok, and they, especially with the trials and hearing people from government who are older talk, it's very apparent that there's certain people who are out of touch with even how technology works, right? How things behave as just like on a
Listening
baseline.
to that man try to grok Wi-Fi. I don't know if you guys have seen that clip.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so there's
Ooh, it's
the
hysterical.
CEO of TikTok is getting grilled by government officials, and there's this like meme going around of him being like, "Does your app access Wi-Fi?" And he's like, "If you give it permission to," he goes, "This is an industry standard. All your apps, yes, I guess, are using your Wi-Fi to access the internet." And it just the questions and the conversation gets so warped and twisted, and the misunderstanding of like how technology works, just like at a baseline, like this is normal. We all use technology that does this on a day to day. And then Aztec on like a follow-up question, as culture shifts, is the tech keeping up or is it leading the charge, I think is what he meant. So, or maybe the change is what he meant. So I didn't know if either of you had comments around generational understanding and just where, is tech leading the way? Is culture leading the way?
That's a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
Because I think both things can be correct in different use cases. In some use cases, there is a problem that people were trying to solve and then tech came after it. And sometimes you think something is cool, you try building something, and as a result, some other interesting tech came out of it. So I think it just depends on the industry and space that you're a part of, or you don't even have to be an industry. It could really just be, at this point, someone could just be on their laptop, build something really cool, and then post it on the internet or TikTok or whatever. And that's it. And just putting it out there to the world. So to answer your question, I don't know what comes first, if it's culture or if it's tech. I just think it definitely depends. But I think that in most spaces, I think we at least at the very have some sort of baseline problem we're trying to solve before we put in a lot of time and effort into building something.
So one of the things, I'm going to loop us back all the way around because there were questions that I wanted to follow up on, and then we went down an excellent and interesting rabbit hole. But I'm going to bring us all the way back. One of the things you said that I think was so crucial is talking about the inclusion of affected groups in what you're building. And can you talk a little bit more about how companies can do that? What does that mean, right? Because include people can sometimes be a really broad statement from a like actionable way. How can developers include the affected groups in the kind of products that they're creating?
Well, I think the first step is hiring.
Just nope, correct.
Hire the people that you find interesting, inspiring, and relevant to the work that you are building. I think that's like the first step. And then others is just going into the field, into those local communities that you feel like will be affected by said thing that you are trying to build. There was a book that I read called Design Justice, 10 out of 10 recommend. And they talk about this idea of like user research, and even in situations where we bring users into, let's say, like an office space, you might end up getting different types of responses for the questions that you have, as opposed to we as the technologists, as the engineers, as the whomever goes into the actual community and asks those types of questions in their comfortable setting and space. And I think that's really interesting because at the end of the day, we just want to build things that are meaningful and impactful. I think the best way to do it is just going to the community and doing so in a way that's like thoughtful and not extractive. Like, obviously pay these people, ask them thoughtful questions, and do it in such a way where you're not appropriating their work and culture and things like that. So I think there are ways to go about it and do it tastefully without really harming the people you're trying to ultimately help, if that's what the end game is.
Absolutely. And one of the other things, you kind of had two recommendations. The first one was that inclusion of affected groups. The other was bringing in non-tech specialists, right? And I think that's one that gets overlooked a lot because by nature, a team of developers is going to be specialized primarily in one thing, and that is development. But also by nature, most of what we're building is not intended for other developers. Alyssa and I kind of get to be the outsider here because we work at a company that sells developer tooling. But most of the time, people are creating apps or creating products that are intended to be used by people that are not in tech, that are not developers. And you really recommended bringing in kind of external subject matter experts to guide. Can you talk a little bit about how that might look and ways that that person can kind of be a part of the team and influence the work?
Yeah. So when I was mentioning that, I was actually even thinking someone who's not even tech adjacent. So not even like a PM or designer, like these other people who don't necessarily participate in the coding process are still huge hands in the design and building process. So that I feel like when I was making that comment, I was really thinking of just someone who's not relevant to the problem space, but not necessarily in tech.
Got it.
And I think that the best way to bring those people in is first saying that you're interested. I think the first step is just putting that out there that you're interested in these types of people. And I think really emphasizing that everybody is an expert through their lived experiences.
Yes.
And if acknowledging that as like a first step, I think will also really be important, because sometimes people don't join tech because they think it's intimidating or it's very much so black box. And the result of that black box is me on this app doing these things, whatever. But if we invite these people in and normalize just having people who are not in tech or not tech adjacent, and just people who are going to use this product, and show that their contribution to this space is equally, if not more important to those building these things, I think also makes a huge impact in the actual end product.
Great. I'm gonna loop in a comment that I saw that I thought was interesting. This is Sam, who, full disclosure, works with us. But he said, tech opens doors to new frontiers, but ethical concerns might invite regulations, which can be tricky to balance.
Ooh, yeah.
And fuel underneath. Devs love when other industries get regulated, but not software tech. I am curious to hear kind of what you think. Do you think that kind of government and official regulations is an answer to ethical problems in tech, or do you think this is a problem that tech needs to solve from the inside?
I think, again, this is on a per field basis, where I think sometimes like government regulations make sense. But then I also feel like on top of government regulations, there needs to be industry specific regulations, which there are in some cases. I'm not saying they don't exist at all, right? So I think that it's hard. It definitely is a tricky balance, but it's up to the people that are building the things and up to the people that are going to release this product into the world to do that work, right? It's just part of the job again. I think that although like as an engineer, my main job is like to build and design and think about how to code something and how to build it meaningfully. I think another part of my job is just thinking about these other things and how they can affect people. It's just another thing that I have to do. And it's a muscle that we all should be exercising. And I think with time and just like with a seamless workflow, I don't think it's going to be as difficult or as intimidating as sometimes it might be in the beginning.
I really like that phrasing of it as a muscle that can be strengthened, right? This is something we all have the capability for, and it might not be something that we're used to doing, but it's absolutely something that we all can do. And the more we do it, the better we get.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes it feel very encouraging and very, very approachable to me.
I think that even sometimes calling it like an ethical framework might even sound way more intimidating than it actually is. It could just be a set of open-ended questions that we should think about or ask before we do something. What are things that we should consider or think about before we build something? Because I think sometimes the idea of like a framework seems like really heavy and a lot of work and could be almost like an excuse to shy away from thinking about these things. But if we think about what a framework would really consist of, it's just these open questions that we should all discuss as the people building whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth, for better or worse, is that we are all making ethical choices every day as part of this job, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
So the more awareness we can bring to it and the more we can practice kind of building that in a way that's mindful and intentional, I think we just get better and better. Trying to think if there was anything else. We're getting close to the end of our time, so I'm reviewing my questions to make sure we've covered all the cool stuff. Is there anything I haven't covered that you were like, why didn't you ask me about XYZ?
Oh, well, I just wanted to shout out some books that I thought were really cool and interesting that I've read,
Yes,
also on my reading
please
list
do.
that other people have read. So there's Weapons of Math Destruction that I think was really interesting. Design Justice is one that I really, really loved. And there's also a Design Justice Network and a platform of people that are just really excited about creating effective change from the design space. And there's the technological singularity. There's like a bunch of just a lot of books out there. And I really just want to shout out a couple and also encourage folks to just a simple Google of like ethics in tech books will bring you a bunch. And some of them can be super dense. Some of them could just really be approachable and easy. Personally, I found, I read Design Justice. So that's the one that kind of got me into this journey and kind of got me thinking about these things. And I found a great community of people through that space and other people who have read the book. So I 10 out of 10 recommend that one for sure. But yeah, I think encouraging like reading, audiobook listening is a great first step in, if you're interested, listening to people or like reading other people's thoughts in the space and what they've done is, I think, super important.
Yeah, I'll even add a couple to your list because I agree. And there's some that I love. One of my favorites is technically wrong. I'm reaching over to my bookshelf because I always have it. This is one of my favorites. I think does a great job of breaking down what isn't working in tech and what we can do. Sarah Watcher Butler, whose name I'm certain that I just destroyed, is fantastic. She also wrote Design for Real Life, which is also good. So 2 more to stick to the list. I think that's just about our time. I'm looking at the clock and it's like 3 minutes till noon. So I'm jumping over to the chat again now. Everyone, you're trying to bait me. I won't fall for it.
Don't worry, chat. Before we get offline today, I'll get her to talk about Star Trek.
No, I don't think I didn't see you guys trying to do it earlier, talking about AI in tabletop role gaming, tabletop role play. I saw it and I was strong. I resisted the urge. That was a double-edged sword because what I know you wanted me to talk about is the Lower Decks episode where they play tabletop role gaming in the holodeck with an AI DM. I saw it. I recognized it for what it was. Didn't fall into the trap.
Oh, that's funny.
So, say all you will. I'm not doing it. But all right. On that note, thank you so much, Selam, for coming on and being part of the panel and also being part of this one-on-one discussion. We really appreciate it.
Yes, deeply value like your opinions and thoughts, and you are a very eloquent speaker. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. And even just creating this platform to have this type of conversation and discussion was really fun.
If folks are looking to hear more from you, they're interested in contacting you, working with you, what's the best way for them to find you online? Or are you unfindable?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, you can just look me up, Selam Moges. Yeah, that's honestly the best way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to sign you off.